My name is Harper, and I never saw it coming. I remember that night like a distant echo, too quiet, the kind of silence that presses its weight against your ears. I was still settling in at the firm, tracing the grain of the conference room table with my fingertips. It felt like any other late evening shift, but there was an undercurrent of something off, an almost imperceptible tremor running through the building's veins. I told myself it was just the ancient HVAC kicking in. In those first weeks, I'd grown close to Logan. We'd sit side by side, swapping coffee thermoses on early mornings. He'd laugh at my jokes when nobody else would, and I found myself lingering by his cubicle, painting over the ache of loneliness with easy conversation. He wore that warm, open grin, and I trusted him more than anyone I'd met since moving here. But then subtle things started to shift. It was never one glaring moment, more like a low hum beneath the surface, a cracked harmony. I'd glance up at his desk and catch him staring at me, eyes glazed, lips curling into a smirk I couldn't place. He'd linger over every word I typed, hovering like a shadow that knew too much, then vanish before I could demand answers. I chalked it up to office nerves. I was new, after all, and obsession looked different on everyone. Until I found the first note. Tucked inside the client files Logan and I were reviewing, there was a torn scrap of a printed email, part of someone else's conversation, one I'd never been copied on. It spoke of late-night meetings at a bar downtown, whispered promises between two names that weren't mine or Logan's. My heart pounded so loud I thought the entire floor must hear. I slid the note into my pocket, hands trembling, mouth suddenly parched. That quiet tremor I'd felt before now seemed to radiate from inside my chest. I left Logan's cubicle and pretended to need a refill, my steps echoing down the hallway too loudly. Over the next few days, I watched him. Every time he thought I wasn't looking, there was a furtive glance at his phone, a hushed grin as he texted someone late into the night. The bar mentioned in the note kept coming up in his browser history, but whenever I asked him about after-work drinks, he'd flash that grin and say, "Just winding down, you know?" His words sounded practiced. I couldn't breathe in that quiet, uncanny calm. It was like being locked underwater, the world muted except for my own frantic pulse. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was paranoid, maybe I was reading too much into nothing. But every time Logan walked past, I felt the weight of unseen eyes, the sting of words unsaid. Then one afternoon, I found his laptop unlocked and abandoned at his desk. I knew I shouldn't. I told myself it was for clarity, for proof. My fingers hovered above the keys, waiting for permission from a conscience that had already fled. I opened his chat app. There it was, messages between Logan and someone named Elise, confessions that were never meant for me. He spoke of us in hushed tones, spoke of how she made him feel alive again. I scrolled faster, each word a cruel whisper, until I saw a plan, a joint resignation, a fresh start where loyalty meant more than office politics. My throat clenched. The world tilted, and I felt dizzy. My hands clenched into fists on the desk, knuckles whitening. The room was too still, too quiet, as if holding its breath to watch me break. I closed the window and shut the laptop with a snap that echoed like gunfire. Alone in that eerie calm, I realized I couldn't let it go. I wouldn't be the oblivious friend smiling while he stole everything we'd built. That night, I sat at the edge of my bed, replaying every joke he'd laughed at, every shared secret. Betrayal had a taste, cold, metallic, sharp, and it coated my tongue. But beneath it all was something else, a curious spark. A thought flickering in the dark, maybe I could turn his own whispers against him. Maybe I could make him question every quiet moment we'd shared. I closed my eyes, feeling the hum settle into my bones, and for the first time, I welcomed it. And that's when I knew revenge would begin, soft as a sigh, subtle as a ghost. I opened my eyes to a new resolve, the air around me crackling with tension. Already, the first move was forming. Soon, Logan would hear the echoes of his own deceit. The next morning, I slipped in before the others, heart hammering against my ribs. The hallway was deserted, the fluorescent lights humming overhead like a held breath. I perched at Logan's empty desk, letting my fingertips ghost over his mouse pad, tracing the faint outline of his thumbprint. The sensation made my pulse quicken, cold, electric. I'd already set the wheels in motion. Late last night, I'd paused by the floor manager and mentioned, almost offhand, that I'd seen Logan duck into that bar downtown with a mystery woman. I didn't name names, just enough to plant a seed. Now that seed hovered in the stale office air, and I watched as Logan strode in a few minutes later, tie slightly askew, cheeks flushed as if he'd already had one too many. His eyes flicked to Sarah, the assistant who always noticed everything, and he gave her a quick smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sarah poured her coffee, eyes never leaving him. Then she slid over to my desk, voice low. "Rough night," she whispered, brow arched. I shrugged, playing casual. He mentioned catching up with someone after work. I let my tone drop like a stone. Sarah's lips pressed together, and I saw the sparks of suspicion dance in her gaze. Over the next few days, I left subtle breadcrumbs, a business card from the bar tucked into Logan's portfolio, a sticky note on his screen reading, "Meet me here," without a signature. Each time he discovered one, his face blanched, fingers trembling as he peeled it away. The quiet in the room thickened, as if even the walls were listening. From my desk, I watched him run a hand through his hair, jaw tense. His shoulders dipped, as though he carried a heavy weight. The hum of computers and distant murmur of phones underscored his growing unease. One afternoon, when the office had emptied out for the weekend, I slipped into the break room. Among the stale magazines, I placed a glossy photo face down, a candid shot of Logan and Elise laughing by the bar's patio, their hands brushing. I'd printed it from a screenshot I'd borrowed, an image he'd never meant me to see. I heard his footsteps before he turned the corner. His boots clicked against the tile, slowing when he spotted the photo. He froze, eyes widening, breath catching. I stepped into the doorway, arms crossed, feigning curiosity. "Where did this come from?" he whispered, voice tight. I said nothing. My silence stretched like a taut wire between us. He stared at me, then at the photo, hand hovering before he swallowed and backed away. His steps echoed, heavy and unsteady, down the corridor. I stayed until the lights flicked off and the building exhaled into darkness. My own breath came quick, nerves frayed, but a small, satisfied smile tugged at my lips. I tucked the photo into my bag as I left. He would wake tomorrow with that image spinning in his mind, doubt gnawing at him. As I locked the office door behind me, I felt the first ripple of momentum. The mind games had begun. Logan would question every whisper, every glance. He'd tremble in his own safe space. And I would be there, watching him unravel, piece by piece. The tension was just the beginning. The current of revenge was gaining strength, and I was already swept into its flow. That afternoon, the tension in the office was like static, every glance felt charged, every footstep echoing louder than usual. I'd waited for the right moment to strike again, and when Logan ducked into the supply closet to grab more folders, I slid his laptop off his desk and carried it into the quiet corner by the copier. My hands shook, a tremor that felt both thrilling and terrifying. You know that sense when your body goes on autopilot, heart hammering, mouth dry? That was me. I opened the folder where I'd secretly stashed 2 pieces of evidence I'd collected over the past nights. Proof number 1, a screenshot of Logan's texts to Elise. "I'm done pretending, babe. I quit next week. Let's disappear forever." Proof number 2, a candid photo of them laughing at the bar's patio. A grainy shot showing Logan's head thrown back in laughter, Elise's hand resting on his shoulder, everything he denied, captured in a split second. I stared at the screen. Those 2 proofs were enough to shatter him, but I wanted more than chaos, I wanted complete unraveling. I copied them onto a USB drive and tucked it into my pocket. A few days later, when the office had emptied out for the late shift, I casually bumped into Sarah by the printer. She sighed, juggling a stack of reports. "I swear this place is eating me alive," she said. I offered a sympathetic nod and slipped her the USB drive under the guise of accidentally picking up the wrong files. Her eyes flicked to the label, confidential. She looked up, puzzled, and I mumbled, "Oh, sorry. Thought it was mine." She shrugged and walked away, thumb hovering over the drive's name as if curiosity was an itch she couldn't scratch. That night, when I logged back into my own computer, I found a single Word document waiting for me on the desktop. Its title was, "You Should Know." Inside were screenshots of an internal HR email chain. Someone had forwarded Logan's secrets and photos to the entire management team. I clicked through the pages, stomach twisting. His career was already in freefall. The next morning, Logan arrived looking pale, eyes ringed with sleeplessness. His tie was strangled too tight, and he kept running a hand over his face, as if trying to wipe away the nightmare. He noticed me at my desk and gave a shaky nod. His voice was rough. "Hey, Harper, did you see any of that?" He didn't finish, but I knew what he meant. He didn't need to say it. I leaned back, feigning ignorance. "See what?" I asked, brow arching in mock surprise. My voice was soft, almost apologetic. He blinked and shook his head, as though he couldn't decide whether to lean in or run away. The silent war between us pulsed in that moment, fear mixed with regret in his eyes, and a flicker of something else, like guilt or, maybe longing for redemption. Over the next few days, I watched him navigate hushed meetings with HR, overheard his whispered pleas for context that nobody could, or would, provide. His shoulders sagged under the weight of rumors, and I saw him stumble through presentations, voice cracking. Yet even as he faltered, there was a flicker of defiance. I caught him mouthing Elisa's name in a hallway mirror, as if searching his reflection for a clue to what went wrong. One evening, just as twilight was settling, I found a printed email on my keyboard. It read, "I'm sorry, Harper. I never meant," but the rest was smeared, torn away. I pressed my palm to the paper, feeling the ghost of his apology. My jaw locked, and a shallow breath rattled in my chest. It was the first genuine confession I'd ever seen from him. For a heartbeat, I hesitated, anger warred with the faint ache of the person I once trusted. Then I tucked the torn letter into my pocket. I knew the game wasn't over. Logan's own remorse would become my next weapon, or perhaps, my next danger. Because somewhere beneath those whispered apologies and trembling lips, part of me still cared what he thought. And so the current of revenge, quiet, eerie, almost gentle, pulled me onward. The next move would be the hardest yet. I waited until late again, when the office was empty except for the hum of machines cooling down. The air felt thicker than usual, like the walls themselves had grown curious. I tucked that torn note into my jacket, its ragged edge pressing cold against my ribs. I paced by Logan's desk, mind racing as though caught in a current I couldn't escape. He hadn't reached out after that apology. Instead, I learned through the rumor mill that he'd taken a leave of absence, claimed burnout, they said. I watched his empty chair like a wound in the schedule board, each blank day a pulse in the silence. I missed him, oddly, painfully, like a phantom limb, even as my resolve hardened around the idea that I needed one final push. So I drafted an email. It sat unsent in my drafts folder for hours, each word a weight in my chest. I told myself it was a chance for closure, an invitation to meet at the bar where it had all begun, under the guise of wanting to understand. But really, I wanted to see him tremble. I wanted him to confront the wreckage of our friendship and, God help me, maybe see if there was any shred of the old warmth left in his eyes. When I finally hit send, the click resonated like a shot. My breath caught. The subject line read, "Can we talk?" No dates, no times, just a question dangling between us. I pictured him opening it, stomach knotting, mind racing through every late-night text, every stolen glance. That evening, I slipped back into the bar's half-lit corner, the place where I'd first glimpsed the ease of his smile and, later, the ease of his lies. The bartender gave me a nod, respect for someone who'd become a regular mystery. I ordered a water, black coffee if I was trying to seem casual, and let my eyes drift toward the entrance. Time crawled. The TV flickered overhead, a muted glow on the scuffed wood. My hands trembled so subtly I almost didn't notice until I realized I was peeling the edge of my sleeve between my fingers. My mouth was dry, lips tightening against some unspoken fear. Then he appeared. Logan's shoulders were hunched, and he stopped in the doorway as if bracing himself against something he'd rather forget. His eyes flicked to me, surprise blending with guilt and something that looked almost like relief. He approached slowly, each step hesitant. "Harper," he said, voice low, strained. He slid into the booth opposite me, knee knocking against mine. The bar's dull chatter and clink of glasses felt miles away. He looked at me, really looked, and for a moment I saw the man I'd trusted, the friend who'd laughed with me over spilled coffee in this very place. I cleared my throat. Thanks for coming." My voice wavered. My hands curled into fists in my lap. "I needed to see you face to face." My words felt tiny against the cavern of all we'd lost. His throat bobbed. "I'm sorry, Harper." Don't," I interrupted softly. My chest tightened, heartbeats echoing like footsteps down a long hallway. "I read your apology. I saw your regret." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the torn note. He flinched, eyes widening, breath hitching. "I didn't mean for you to see that," he whispered, voice cracking. His fingers grazed the table, knuckles pale. I set the note down and leaned forward, each inch a deliberate choice. I never asked to see it. But I did. And now I need to know, were any of the things you said to Elise ever real? Or were they all just words you needed to escape me? My jaw went rigid, words catching in my throat. "Tell me." He looked away, gaze tracing the bar's dim corner as if seeking refuge. His leg bounced under the table, eyes haunted. Finally, he exhaled, shoulders sagging. "They were real, Harper. I just didn't know how to feel both ways. I felt alive with her, but his voice broke, and he forced the rest out. "I'm sorry." Silence stretched, heavy as water. I felt a tremor in my hands. My mind flickered between the memory of his laughter and the sharp sting of his betrayal. The eerie calm I'd craved now felt ominous, like standing on the edge of a frozen lake, unsure which way to step. I folded my hands, nails pressing into palms until they whitened. "Then what happens now?" I whispered, voice small. "Do we just pretend this never happened?" My heart thudded so loud I thought he might hear it. He swallowed, chest rising and falling. "I don't know," he admitted. His voice was softer, vulnerable. "I want to make it right, but I don't know how." The tension wound tighter in my chest. I realized revenge had led me here, but now I faced the aftermath, the raw, exposed wounds that no game could heal. In that moment, I saw the choice before me, to crush him completely or to let something new begin from the ruins. I stared at him, feeling the eerie calm shift. The current of revenge had brought us together one last time. Now it was up to me to decide if it would carry us into deeper darkness, or if I could finally let go. I watched him lift his coffee cup, fingers trembling, as if each second stretched thinner than the last. The low hum of the bar felt distant now, less like background noise and more like the beating of my own blood in my temples. Across from me, Logan's shoulders slumped, eyes fixed on the table's worn wood, tracing its grain as if it held answers. I took a breath, feeling the eerie calm ripple through me again. It was the same silence I'd learned to welcome, the one that meant everything was about to change. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the torn note, his apology, half erased, ragged at the edges. I laid it flat between us. He flinched, eyes snapping up. "You," he began, throat thick. "Don't," I said, voice low. My own hands shook, I pressed my palms flat on the table, nails digging in until they bit white. "We both know why I called you here." He bit his lip, breathing in short, shallow gasps. "I'm sorry," he whispered again, but the words sounded hollow, as if swallowed before he spoke. I leaned forward. That apology. I read it and felt something twist inside me. Guilt, yeah, but also pity. My voice cracked. Because I realized I'd become something else, someone who needs more than regret and broken promises. Logan's gaze wavered. His jaw locked. I saw the memory of our laughter flicker behind his eyes. I remembered every late-night theory session at our desks, every shared confidence about future dreams. It felt like someone else's life, one I'd given away without thinking. I thought, maybe I could forgive you, I said, tone softer now, but forgiveness is cheap when it's unearned. So I had two choices, let you drown in your own shame, or pull you under myself. He swallowed, nostrils flaring. What do you want from me? His voice trembled. Part fear, part desperate hope. I let the question hang. The note lay between us like a silent judge. My heart hammered, the calm inside me throbbing with dark purpose. I reached toward him, fingers brushing the edge of the paper. I want you to suffer that same quiet. I paused. To feel the whisper of doubt in every conversation. To question every loyalty you ever claimed. Logan's breath hitched. You're going to ruin me, he said, voice flat. I already have, I replied, standing so the overhead light flickered against my face, sharp angles of resolve and hurt. But I'm giving you one chance, just one, to prove whether you were ever real with me. Meet me tomorrow in the office at midnight. Alone. I'll bring everything I've collected. I nodded toward the bar door, eyes cold. You'll know what to do. He slid back, chair scraping. What happens if I don't? His lips quivered. I closed my eyes for a heartbeat, feeling my jaw lock. Then I exhaled slowly. Then you'll never know peace. I'll send those files to your new life. To everyone who ever trusted you. And when the world you built shatters, you'll realize too late that I held the key. His face went ashen. This is madness, he whispered. Madness is a river, I said, voice almost gentle, and once you're swept in, there's no climbing out on your own. I picked up the note and folded it, chest tight. Tomorrow, Logan. Midnight. Be there. Without waiting for his answer, I turned and walked out into the night, the door's chime echoing a promise. My sneakers hit the sidewalk in steady, deliberate steps, heart racing but calm inside, an uncanny stillness that meant I'd chosen to let the current carry me deeper. By the time I reached my car, the tremor had settled into a slow pulse. I paused, hand on the door handle, and felt the weight of what I'd unleashed. Logan's fate, and mine, would be decided in those silent hours. I realized, with a strange mix of fear and anticipation, that revenge wasn't a single act but a path we'd both walk down together. As I drove home under streetlights that flickered like distant stars, I whispered to myself, let the river run its course. And inside, where the calm and the storm met, I knew the true test was just beginning. The office was a cave of shadows when I slipped in, keycard tapping soft against the scanner. My pulse throbbed in my throat, but inside I felt the same eerie stillness, like the world had paused just for this moment. The hum of the servers in the IT closet sounded distant, almost comforting, as if they understood the gravity of what was about to happen. I set my bag down at my old workstation, the one Logan had commandeered after I'd moved on. The swivel chair creaked when I sat, and I let the memory of him sitting there, smiling over spreadsheets, confiding in me about weekend plans, wash through me for a second before I focused. On the desktop lay an encrypted folder I'd prepared days ago. Inside it were everything, the screenshots, the photos, the torn note, the hidden drafts, even personal messages he'd sent me in private. I'd labeled it, for midnight, and bookmark pinned it to the screen. My hands trembled when I plugged in the thumb drive. Screen lit up, password prompt blinking like a heartbeat. I typed the code, our anniversary date of friendship, the one he'd always remembered, and pressed enter. The folder opened, rows of indisputable proof staring back at me. I swallowed, mouth dry, and let a slow breath out, tasting metal on my tongue. A soft click behind me made my spine coil. Logan stepped out of the shadows near the conference room door, coat pulled tight around him. His eyes were red-rimmed, pupils wide, and sweat dampened his upper lip. He looked older, worn at the edges, like a photograph left too long in sunlight. I'm here, he said, voice barely more than a whisper. He rubbed his thumb across the ID badge clipped to his belt, fingers like tremors. You said you'd show me. I nodded once, stiffly. You wanted proof. This is the last piece. My voice was low, almost reverent, like I was about to unveil something sacred. The chair creaked as I spun it to face him, laptop angled so he had no choice but to look. He advanced hesitantly, each step quiet on the carpet. I don't know if I can watch, he admitted, gaze flicking to the screen then away, jaw clenched so tight his Adam's apple bobbed. You don't have to, I said, voice softening. Just listen. I clicked on a PDF, our text thread from that night at the bar, the one where he'd exclaimed, Elise makes me feel alive. The words scrolled slowly, each line a nail in the coffin of his lies. His breath hitched. He swallowed hard, tears pooling at the corners of his eyes. He choked, but the screen's glow swallowed his words. I let the file sit open. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the shiver of the air conditioning. Finally, he exhaled, head dropping. I'm sorry, he said again, voice cracked. I never meant to hurt you. I closed the laptop gently, thumbs sweeping the trackpad as if silencing a creature. The folder vanished, replaced by the default wallpaper, our firm's logo. Logan blinked, as if released from a trance, and looked at me with trembling hope. What now? My chest tightened. For weeks I'd built this moment, feeding the undercurrent of doubt until he could barely breathe without suspicion. Yet now, standing face to face in the dim light, I realized the final step was the hardest. Revenge had brought us here, but what came next? I reached into my pocket and pulled out the yellowed apology note, half-torn, jagged. I'll give you a choice, I said, voice steady but low. You can admit everything to HR tomorrow. You can own your mistakes and try to rebuild, if they'll let you. Or I'll send this package to your fiancé, your family, your new clients. They deserve to know who you really are. He closed his eyes, body trembling like a leaf in wind. Please, he whispered. Let me fix this. The tension in my chest eased, the eerie calm shifting to something warmer yet still taut. I folded the note and held it out. Signature, I said. His hand shook so badly the pen trembled between his fingers. He signed in a spidery scrawl, each letter jagged with apology. I tucked the paper into the folder, zipped it shut. He exhaled loudly, relief and shame mingling in his eyes. Thank you, he said, voice hushed. I'll do whatever it takes. I stood slowly, the swivel chair scraping softly. Good, I replied, tone impassive. Then this ends tonight. He nodded, shoulders slumping, as though a great weight had lifted. We left the office together into the pre-dawn blue, side by side yet worlds apart. The city was quiet, streetlights flickering out one by one as dawn approached. I felt the current of revenge finally break, its force spent, leaving behind a wary peace. As I watched him walk away down the empty sidewalk, I realized that revenge wasn't an end but a transformation. And though the river had run its course, the echoes of its flow would stay with me forever. The street lamp glow faded as sunlight bled into the sky, painting the sidewalk gold. I watched Logan's silhouette shrink down the block, shoulders bent as if carrying something heavier than the dawn. The air was cool and tasted like possibility. My palms still tingled from the pen's weight in my pocket. The final signature had been his surrender, and maybe his salvation. But when revenge ends, what feeds the hollow it leaves behind? Days blurred into a jittery routine. I found myself retracing our old path to that bar in the evenings, half expecting him to sit across from me, bruised-voiced and contrite. But the booths stayed empty. The bartender scanned me with polite concern as I nursed black coffee, legs bouncing beneath the table. My mouth was dry, my jaw clenched. I realized I craved more than retribution. I craved closure, something beyond the snap of justice. At work, the corridors seemed to pulse with aftershocks of last week's events. I caught colleagues in hushed huddles, eyeing me with a strange mix of respect and wariness. Sarah gave me a tight nod in the hallway, offering no words. I sensed she knew more than she let on. I often heard Logan's name whispered with a sigh: burnout, HR investigation, someone missing in the ranks. But I never asked. I didn't want the crumbs of his downfall. I wanted the taste of something real. In late shifts, I lingered in the office after everyone left, scrolling through old messages on my phone. I found myself reading our conversations, laughing emojis, late-night project brainstorming, inside jokes nobody else understood. My chest tightened at the memory of trust held between us. The revenge had kept me alive in a way, filling that ache. Now, without it, I felt unmoored, like a branch detached and drifting downstream. One afternoon, with sunlight streaming through the blinds, I found a coffee cup on my desk, Logan's signature mug, deep blue with a chipped handle. I stared at it, fingers brushing its cool ceramic, heart fluttering in my ribcage. There was no steam rising. No note. Yet the sight of it transported me back to his smile. I wrapped my fingers around the mug, feeling its weight anchor me. I realized then I was still tangled in the aftermath, caught between empathy and distrust. That night, I left my apartment and wandered to the bar one more time. The door swung closed behind me like a sigh. The regulars at the counter barely looked up as I passed. The bartender slid me the usual black coffee without a word. I sipped, letting the bitter warmth seep into me. My vision blurred at the edges. Was it fatigue or tears? Probably both. Guilt stung sharper than triumph ever did. When I stood to leave, I heard a hesitant voice: "Harper?" I froze. Logan stood under the amber light by the pool tables. His coat was the same one he'd worn at midnight, shoulders squared but face softer, eyes bright with something raw. My heart lurched. He swallowed and took a step forward. I wanted to say, his voice caught, tremor threading through it. "Thank you. And I'm sorry." He held up a small envelope, the same size as the note I'd torn. My breath stuttered, limbs rigid. Years of friendship and weeks of betrayal coiled inside me. Part of me braced for another trick. Another ghost in the currents. I folded my arms, stance defensive. "What now?" I whispered, voice ragged. My nails bit into my palms as I awaited his answer. He exhaled slowly, gaze flicking to the tables, to the door, back to me. "I don't expect forgiveness." His eyes glistened. "I came to return something." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the chipped mug. "This is yours." His fingers brushed mine as he handed it over. A spark of warmth jolted through me. My breath hitched. The mug felt familiar in my grip, heavy with history. "Why?" I managed. He shook his head, lips quivering. "I realized the revenge you gave me helped me see who I lost. Not just you, but who I was. I want to start fixing things. Not with apologies alone, but actions." His eyes searched mine, vulnerability raw. "Maybe one day you can trust me again. But I'll earn it." Silence stretched, electric. The hum of the bar felt like a heartbeat syncing with mine. I wrapped my hands around the mug, warmth seeping through ceramic. My chest loosened, a single breath filling the space between us. The current of our story shifted again, not vengeance, not justice, but something uncharted. As I nodded, eyes stinging, I felt the river widen. Maybe it would carry us somewhere neither of us expected, toward healing, toward a fragile new beginning. Next morning I arrived at the office before anyone else. The floor felt quieter than usual, like it was waiting for something to happen. My steps echoed down the hallway, and I could feel the weight of the chipped mug tucked into my bag against my thigh. I hesitated by the elevator, breath catching as I considered turning back. But curiosity, that flicker I hadn't felt since everything began, pushed me forward. At my desk, Sarah was already there, eyes on her screen but head lifting when I walked in. She gave me a small nod, as if we shared a secret code. I swallowed, voice catching. "Morning," I said, and she returned it with a half smile. The mug peeked out of my bag, and I realized I wanted to set it down but didn't know where. I plopped my bag on the chair, coffee mug in hand, and placed it gently on my desk. Its chipped handle faced me, the boardroom light catching the glaze. I powered on my computer, keyboard clicks sounding loud in the hush. I opened my inbox and found a single email from Logan titled, "Update." I stared at it for a moment, pulse fluttering. Opening it felt like sliding open a window that might let in a chill breeze, but I clicked anyway. His message was short. He said he'd spoken with HR, arranged to return next week under a performance improvement plan. He asked if we could meet for lunch later that day to discuss handing back my old workstation. He ended with, "Whatever you decide, thanks again." My heart lurched, words catching in my throat. I read it twice, then stared at the screen. The quiet hummed around me, thicker now. I realized I'd been holding my breath. I exhaled slowly, fingertips brushing the chipped mug. It felt cold, steady. I typed back, "Sure. Let's do noon." Lunch arrived faster than I expected. The break room was half empty, and the microwave beeped as I reheated leftovers. Logan walked in, shoulders squared, looking more confident than I'd seen. He carried a brown paper bag. He set his lunch down and offered a nod that was almost shaky. We sat at the small table, chairs a whisper apart. The hum of the fridge and distant phone rings filled the silence until he spoke. "I'm meeting with HR this afternoon," he said, voice steady but quiet. "They want to know how I can improve, where I messed up, and how to fix it." I dug into my salad without looking up. I could feel his gaze but pushed my shoulders down. "That's good," I said, sounding too casual even to myself. My fork felt heavy. "It's a chance to do better." He nodded, eyes softening. "I want to make this right," he said. "At least between us. Then I'll worry about the rest." He hesitated. I know trust isn't given back with an email or a pen. His fingers tapped the table. "But I hope, maybe we can work together again, like before." My jaw locked. I thought about the thrill of my revenge, the satisfaction as his life shook. But I also thought about the echo it left in my chest. That phantom ache I couldn't fill. I looked at him, really looked, tremor in his jaw as he waited, the way he kept tucking a stray lock behind his ear, the genuine remorse in his eyes. I set my fork down. My voice trembled. "I'm glad you're trying to fix this." I studied his face. "But I need more than words." I paused. "Actions speak louder. I need to see you own your mistake, not just here, but with the whole team." He exhaled, relief and anxiety mingling in his expression. "I understand." He straightened, wrapping his hands around his shirt. "I'll keep you updated. I'll prove it." I nodded slowly. The tension in my chest eased into cautious hope. The river of our story was still flowing, but for the first time, its current wasn't just revenge. It was something different, fragile, uncertain, but maybe real. I picked up the chipped mug and held it out. "Thank you," I said softly. He took it, fingers brushing mine. The chipped edge felt warm in my palm. "Thank you," he echoed. Back at my desk after lunch, I placed the mug next to my monitor. It caught the light when I typed my next report, each keystroke echoing like a heartbeat. I realized I had been holding my breath again. The quiet office felt different, warmer, somehow, like it had accepted the possibility of change. I glanced at the mug's chip, imagining Logan's remorse each time he signed that note. My chest felt heavy, but not with anger. It was the weight of promise, to let go of the darkness that had driven me forward. I traced the crack with my fingertip and let out a slow breath. Later that afternoon, I walked by Logan's old workstation. No one was there yet. I paused, memory of his laughter filling the empty space. I felt a flicker of something, sadness? Empathy? I shook it off and moved on. But deep down, I wondered if I could allow myself to trust again. If the river had carried us both toward forgiveness or just deeper currents I hadn't yet faced. We both had a long way to go. But for now, as the sun dipped through the blinds and the office lights flickered on, I felt a tentative start, a quiet beginning of something neither revenge nor regret could define. Morning light filtered through the blinds as I settled into my chair, the chipped mug from Logan catching glints of gold. The office felt different, warmer, less like a battlefield. Yet beneath the calm, I sensed undercurrents of uncertainty. Today was the first team meeting since Logan's return, and I wasn't sure what to expect. When the rest of the group filed in, their glances flickered between us. I caught Sarah's eye. She offered a reassuring nod. Logan arrived last, his posture straight, his steps measured. He carried a stack of reports, the same quiet determination in his gait that I'd admired before the betrayal. He set the papers on the conference table, and our eyes met for a moment, an unspoken acknowledgement of the path we'd traveled. Our manager began outlining a new project, a client presentation that would demand our department's best work. As he spoke, I felt Logan's gaze drift to me. There was no guilt there now, only focus. When he spoke up, offering a suggestion to refine our data visuals, his tone was steady, professional. The manager agreed, and soon the room hummed with energy. During the brainstorming session, Logan and I were paired up. I felt my pulse quicken, the familiar flutter of tension mixed with something like anticipation. We exchanged a quick, awkward smile before diving into the numbers. I slid the mug to the corner of the table, its chipped side facing him, a subtle reminder that we'd both been damaged but still functional. As we worked, Logan filled in background context I'd overlooked. He pointed out trends in the quarterly figures, his finger tracing lines on the chart as if rediscovering territory we'd once explored together. I realized how much I'd missed his insights. But then a new statistic caught my eye, a projection error I'd made. My stomach dropped. I glanced up to see Logan watching me. My cheeks warmed. "Hey, Harper," he said softly so only I would hear. "Check cell D12. Did you mean to pull last year's figures instead of the current quarter?" Heat flared in my chest. Part of me bristled, old pride wounded by his correction. But another part dared to appreciate the clarity in his tone. I nodded, swallowing. "Good catch," I admitted. My voice shook slightly. I corrected the formula, and the chart realigned, the data snapping into crisp lines. Logan's relief was subtle, just a small exhale, but I felt it in the space between us. "There," he murmured. "That looks solid." Throughout the rest of the session, we collaborated on slide design and narrative flow. Our ideas synced naturally, the way they once had. Occasionally, colleagues paused and offered approving smiles when they saw our teamwork. Each glance chipped away at my residual suspicion. After the meeting, Logan lingered. His voice was quiet as the hallway lights. "Thanks for trusting me on that. And, thanks for giving me a second chance." I toyed with the chipped edge of my mug, tracing its roughness with my fingertip. "I'm glad you're back," I said, surprising myself with the sincerity in my tone. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous. But today, it felt right. He nodded, shoulders easing. "I know. I want to earn your trust, every day. Not just with work, but with honesty." As he spoke, I recognized something deeper than professional respect, a fragile bond recovering from fracture. Yet I also sensed the lingering echo of betrayal, a memory that wouldn't vanish overnight. I took a steadying breath. "I believe you," I replied. "Let's keep building from here." In the days that followed, our collaboration deepened. We stayed late, dissecting datasets and refining slides. Sometimes we shared coffee from the chipped mug, its familiar weight anchoring us in a new reality. There were moments when I caught myself smiling at his jokes, genuine laughter unfurling after months of guarded formality. But beneath the progress, I felt the current of our story still swirling with hidden eddies. Trust, once broken, didn't restore itself smoothly, it required constant tending. I realized that while revenge had been a river that carried us apart and back together, forgiveness would be the bridge we built, plank by plank, imperfect but sturdy. That evening, as I shut down my computer, I closed my eyes and let the day's warmth wash over me. The mug sat beside my keyboard, chipped but whole, an emblem of our journey. Tomorrow, we would return to the project, side by side. And I dared to hope that this time, the current would carry us forward together. I arrived at my desk before dawn's pale light filled the windows, coffee in hand, readying for another day of collaboration. The chipped mug perched at the corner of my desk like a talisman against old wounds. Logan's workstation sat neatly beside mine, its surface cleared of the clutter that once spoke of his absence. The air carried the familiar hum of computers powering on, a low vibration that felt reassuring. By mid-morning, Sarah stopped by with 2 steaming lattes. She slid one across to me and flashed a small, knowing smile. "Feeling good today?" she whispered. I nodded, sipping the bittersweet warmth. Her eyes flicked toward Logan, who was crouched over his keyboard in deep concentration. "He's really committed," she said softly. "I think he means it." I watched Logan as he straightened and offered his screen to a junior analyst, walking her through a complex pivot table formula. He spoke in that even, patient tone, no trace of the old arrogance or deceit. The junior analyst grinned as the columns rearranged, and Logan's relief was subtle but present, a slow exhale of tension. Later, during a client call, Logan led the presentation. His voice was steady, each point clear and confidently delivered. I could feel my chest loosen as he navigated questions with transparency, admitting where data had gaps and proposing next steps. At one point, he paused and said, "I apologize for the earlier confusion on our end. We're taking extra measures to ensure accuracy." His candid admission drew appreciative nods from the clients, who responded with follow-up questions rather than skepticism. After the call, the team dispersed to tackle action items. I lingered at the conference table, jotting notes when I noticed a small envelope tucked under the monitor at Logan's desk. It was unmarked, cream-colored, its flap sealed with a faded sticker. My pulse quickened. Revenge had taught me to expect hidden agendas. I glanced around, nobody was watching. Curiosity urged me forward. I slipped the envelope into my bag for later. Back at my desk, I cleared some space and opened it. Inside lay a crumpled receipt from a pharmacy, an itemized list of medications, some marked urgent refill. No name, no context, just terse entries: painkillers, anti-inflammatory ointment, a note scribbled in faded ink, "Take as needed." My breath caught. Logan had never mentioned any health issues. Was this why he'd grown distant? Had he been hiding something deeper than affection for someone else? I slipped the receipt back into the envelope and closed it, mind racing. My hands trembled with the same electric anticipation I'd once felt plotting his downfall. But this time, the spark was tinted with something else: concern. I remembered the apology note he'd torn. The remorse in his eyes. Had his secrets been born of pain as much as betrayal? That afternoon, I found Logan alone in the break room, reheating leftover soup. He stood beneath the harsh fluorescent light, shoulders drawn in as though bearing an invisible burden. His movement was slow, deliberate, as if conserving strength. I stepped in quietly. "Hey," I said gently. He looked up, surprise flickering, then masked by polite caution. "Lunch?" He hesitated, then nodded. We sat at the corner table. The chipped mug between us felt heavy with possibility. I pushed the envelope toward him. "What's this?" I asked, voice low. He stared at it, dread flickering across his face. His hand trembled as he picked it up and unfolded the receipt. He blinked, throat working, and for a moment he looked like a man haunted. He began, eyes on the paper, then looked up at me. "That is mine," he said, voice small. "I've been dealing with chronic pain, something I didn't want to burden anyone with. I thought I could manage it quietly." He swallowed. "I was absent those nights because I was in too much pain. I pushed people away instead of asking for help." I felt a strange tug in my chest. The memory of his betrayals battled with the rawness of his confession. My fingers absently traced the chip in my mug. The quiet hummed around us, charged with uncertainty. He folded the receipt and set it on the table. "I'm not making excuses," he said. "Just context." I realize now I should have trusted people more than I withdrew. I exhaled slowly. The river of my revenge had carried me here, to a place neither of us anticipated. "Thank you for telling me," I said at last, choosing my words with care. "I'm sorry you suffered alone." My voice cracked, and I looked away before he could see the conflict in my eyes. He nodded, relief and shame mingling in his expression. "I understand if you still can't," his sentence trailed off. I picked up the receipt and tucked it into my pocket. "Let's just keep talking," I replied quietly. "Together." I lifted the chipped mug in a small toast. "To honesty." He mirrored the gesture, the chipped edges meeting. "To honesty," he echoed. As we left the break room side by side, I felt the current shift again, not toward revenge, not yet toward full forgiveness, but towards something deeper, empathy emerging from the waters of betrayal. And in that fleeting moment, I sensed the true test of our story was only beginning. I arrived at the office early, drawn by a restless knot in my chest. The morning light glinted off the chipped mug on my desk, the emblem of our fragile truce. Today was Logan's first day fully back on the project, without any special concessions. I felt a swirl of anticipation and unease as I booted up my computer and reviewed the day's agenda. By mid-morning, our team's new client presentation was due for a dry run. In the small conference room, everyone gathered around the table. Logan took his place beside me, the chipped mug at his elbow as if it belonged to both of us now. His posture was upright, confident without arrogance. I noticed his fingers tapping a rhythm against the table, nervous energy restrained by determination. Our manager clicked through the slides, and when she paused on Logan's section, he leaned forward and began speaking. His voice was calm, measured, and he navigated each point with precision. I watched as he invited feedback, genuinely listening and making notes. When a junior team member pointed out a potential flaw in the timeline, Logan thanked her and suggested a realistic adjustment, crediting her insight. There was no defensiveness, only collaboration. A subtle shift rippled through the room. Colleagues who had treated him warily now nodded in approval. Sarah caught my eye and offered a quick smile. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe, to appreciate that consequence could give way to possibility. Yet beneath that relief lay a residue of mistrust, a reminder of how easily harmony could fracture. After the meeting, Logan stayed behind to refine the final slides. I sank into a chair across from him, the chipped mug catching the afternoon sun. He looked up, fatigue lining his face, but his eyes held a spark. "Thanks for letting me lead that section," he said quietly. "I wanted to earn back your faith, and the team's." I swirled the last dregs of coffee in my own chipped mug and met his gaze. "You did," I replied softly. My heart pounded in my throat. "You're doing more than I thought possible." My words felt fragile, like a bridge spanning old wounds. He exhaled, relief and gratitude mixing in his expression. "There's something else," he said, voice lowering. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small stack of envelopes, the same cream-colored paper as the receipt envelope from before. "I promised I'd be transparent," he continued. "So I cataloged what I've learned these past weeks, my pain management schedule, how it affected my work, and the steps I'm taking to keep it from disrupting the team." He slid an envelope across the table. I unfolded it and saw his neat handwriting detailing medical appointments, medication changes, and contingency plans for days he might be incapacitated. Underneath, a personal note: "I never wanted my health to become another excuse or burden. I hope this shows I'm committed to our work, and to being honest." My chest tightened at the raw vulnerability in his gesture. He'd gone to lengths I'd never expected, documenting his struggles not for pity, but to protect our collaboration. I folded the note, eyes stinging. "This means more than you know," I whispered. "Thank you for trusting me with it." He nodded, a rare vulnerability softening his features. "I want to rebuild not just our friendship, but the things we built together: teamwork, trust, respect. His gaze lifted to meet mine. I understand if it takes time. I'll keep proving myself. In that moment, I realized the river we'd navigated, the one of betrayal, revenge, and grudging alliance, was widening into something unpredictable, a shared stream of honesty and mutual care. But I also understood that bridges, once burned, required constant tending. We had to walk across together, step by careful step. I picked up the chipped mug, its rough edge warm between my palms. "One day at a time," I said, meeting his eyes. "Let's see where this current takes us." He offered a tentative smile, and for the first time since betrayal, I believed in a future where our story wasn't defined by two separate banks, but by the bond we forged in the waters between. The next morning, the office felt hushed in a way that made each footstep echo. I settled into my chair, the chipped mug from Logan still perched beside my keyboard, its handle turned toward me like an unspoken promise. As the glow of the monitors awakened, I realized how natural it felt, our routines interwoven again, but in a new pattern. I opened my inbox and found a note from our manager. "Can you two meet me in my office in 10 minutes? My pulse fluttered. Was this about the project, or did something new threaten our fragile peace? Logan caught my eye across the room. He gave me a quick nod, shoulders squared, readiness in his gaze. We walked side by side down the corridor, the hum of conversations and printers fading behind us. The manager's office door stood open, and inside, she rifled through a stack of papers. When she looked up, her expression was unreadable, professional, but tinged with concern. "Thanks for coming," she said, voice even. She slid a file across the desk. "The client has additional requests for the presentation, some last-minute data they want incorporated. It's tight, but I trust you'll handle it." She paused, eyes shifting to me. "Harper, Logan, I need this by end of day." I swallowed, heat rising in my cheeks. My heart hammered with the pressure of the deadline, but underneath, I felt a steady calm, the same eerie stillness that had guided my revenge, now channeling focus. Logan glanced at the file, then at me, and I sensed the familiar synchronicity return, two minds converging on a challenge. "Of course," I said, voice firm. "We'll get it done." He nodded, the corner of his mouth lifting in that subtle way he'd perfected, half apology, half resolve. "Let's meet in the war room in 5, he suggested. We returned to our desks, and I felt the rhythm settle, urgency humming beneath concentration. Logan pulled up the client's database while I drafted the framework for the new slides. Our fingers flew across keyboards, the click-clack of keys a metronome that tightened our focus. Occasionally, I'd glance at Logan's screen. He was parsing out the latest figures, eyes narrowing as he probed anomalies. "Hey, look at row 23, he murmured, voice low. I leaned in, breath catching as I saw a discrepancy, a missing entry that skewed the projections. My pulse spiked. This could derail the entire deck. "Good catch," I said, tone clipped. I corrected the formula, double-checked the source data, then exhaled slowly. Logan met my eyes, relief and pride mingling in his gaze. For a heartbeat, the office dissolved around us, just two people, trusting each other's judgment. By late afternoon, the slides glowed on the large screen in the war room. We presented to a handful of colleagues, each point crisp and coordinated, Logan explaining the data, me weaving in the narrative. When we got to the revised projections, the room fell silent, absorbing the implications. Then our manager nodded, a small smile breaking through. "Excellent work," she said. "They'll love this." Relief rippled through me, a warm undercurrent that loosened the tension in my chest. Logan exhaled, shoulders relaxing. He turned to me, eyes bright. "We did it," he said, voice soft. I nodded, heart still racing. We did. As evening light dimmed outside, the office emptied. Logan and I lingered, packing up our things. I reached for my bag, tugged out the chipped mug, and held it out to him. "Celebratory coffee?" I offered, with a half smile. He accepted it, their fingers brushing. "Only if you," he paused, shifting his weight. "If you'd like," he corrected, meeting my gaze. I laughed quietly, the sound surprising me with its ease. I'd like that. We headed toward the little cafe downstairs, the chipped mug cradled between us like a shared trophy. In the warm glow of the cafe, I realized how far we'd come, from betrayal and revenge, through tension and confession, now to genuine partnership. Yet beneath the progress, I still felt a flicker of caution. Trust, once fractured, demanded constant care. Over steaming lattes, we talked through tomorrow's timeline, our conversation light but real. Logan's gestures were open, his laughter easy. I caught myself relaxing, letting the past slip into a corner of my mind. But I also stored away the memory of that missing data, the way we'd caught it together. It reminded me that trust wasn't blind, it was earned, moment by moment. Later, as I walked home under the street lamps, the chipped mug tucked into my bag, I felt the current shift again, not toward revenge, not yet toward full restoration, but toward a shared purpose. Our river was winding, unpredictable, but for the first time, its promise felt genuine. Two people navigating the same waters, learning to trust the flow together. The next day, I arrived at my desk before anyone else, the early light filtering through the blinds and casting pale stripes across the chipped mug. I set my bag down and ran a hand over the cool ceramic, feeling the familiar weight settle in my palm like a steady pulse. The office was quiet, every hum of a monitor and soft click of a keyboard sounding magnified in the hush. I let the calm wash over me. Today felt different, like we were standing at the edge of something new. Not long after, Logan slipped in beside me, quiet in his approach. He offered a tight smile, eyes bright with purpose. "Morning," he whispered, leaning toward my desk. "I just got word from the client." His voice was low, and I felt a flutter in my chest. They loved the presentation, called it insightful and engaging. His shoulders relaxed as he said it, and I felt my own tension ease. I smiled back, warmth blooming in my throat. "That's great," I murmured. "We earned it." We fell into our routine immediately. He booted up the dashboard to pull the latest analytics. I drafted the next series of slides. Our fingers flew across the keys, the rhythmic clatter anchoring us in shared purpose. Every so often, our eyes met over the monitors, and a silent thrill rippled through me, proof that we'd reclaimed something we'd once lost. Then, as I switched tabs to import the client's feedback into our notes, an email notification popped up, subject line, urgent, data discrepancy. My heart jolted. I clicked it open and scanned the message. A senior analyst had flagged irregular entries in one of our source files, entries that skewed the projections we just presented. My breath caught. I glanced at Logan, his face slackened as he read over my shoulder. "This can't be right," he said, voice tight. He scrolled through the raw data, eyes narrowing. "Look here, these timestamps overlap. It suggests someone duplicated records." His jaw clenched, and I felt the familiar coil of tension tighten in my spine. Betrayal had slipped back into the current, and it stung. I swallowed, throat dry. "We need to figure out if it was an error or intentional," I said, voice low. My hands trembled slightly as I hovered over the keyboard. The chipped mug seemed to vibrate beside me, a steady reminder of how far we'd come, and how fragile that progress remained. Logan nodded, shoulders squaring. "Let's pull the raw logs," he said. He opened a new query window and began typing, fingers flying with practiced precision. I ran parallel checks on my end, cross-referencing the timestamps against user activity logs. The office grew colder around us, the hum of the air conditioning suddenly sharper. Minutes stretched like hours as we traced the data trail. My heart pounded in my ears, goosebumps rose on my arms. Finally, Logan leaned back and exhaled, rubbing his eyes. "It's not a system glitch," he said. "Someone manually inserted those rows." His voice sounded hollow, both accusation and alarm tangled together. My chest tightened. Every instinct screamed in that moment, suspicion, dread, déjà vu. Who would undermine the work we'd rebuilt? My gaze flicked to the chipped mug, its jagged edge gleaming in the screen's glow. I closed my eyes, summoning the eerie calm that had guided my own acts of quiet revenge. But this time, the target wasn't a betrayal of friendship, it was a threat to everything we'd fought for. I opened my eyes and met Logan's. "We handle this together," I said, voice firmer than I felt. I reached for the mug and squeezed its handle, grounding myself. "Let's find out who's behind it, and make sure it never happens again." He nodded, determination returning to his eyes. "Agreed." He cracked his knuckles and swiveled toward his monitor. "Let's start with access logs, see who touched the data yesterday evening." We dove back into the screens, tracing users, IP addresses, access timestamps. Each click echoed in the silent office, our collaboration tighter than ever. As we worked side by side, I realized how much trust this moment demanded, more than a simple apology, more than even his honesty about pain. It required faith in each other's integrity, a willingness to defend our shared work against an unseen adversary. That calm returned, not in spite of the storm but because of it, a stillness at the eye of our renewed partnership. Whatever this challenge, we would face it together. And in that moment, I understood that our story's current was no longer just about betrayal and revenge. It was about forging something stronger, a bond tested by fire and tempered in shared purpose. I pressed enter on my query and leaned back, pulse steadying. Logan's eyes met mine on his screen. "Got it," he said. "I think we know where to start." I nodded, heart steady. "Then let's go." Together, we plunged into the work, the chipped mug watching like a silent witness to the next act of our shared journey. I tracked the IP address through the access logs while Logan hovered at my shoulder, breath quiet but steady. Each keystroke echoed in the hushed office, fluorescent lights humming above like a swarm of distant bees. My fingers trembled, my heart thudding against my ribs, as I followed the trail to a cubicle I'd barely noticed before, Derek's, the junior analyst assigned to double-check my figures last week. I froze, vision narrowing on the screen, mind racing with disbelief. Logan's hand landed on my arm, warm pressure grounding me. "You see it too," he whispered. His voice was tight, low, as though afraid the walls might overhear. I swallowed, throat dry, throat tightening like a noose. He was here at midnight," I said, voice trembling. My palms pressed flat on the desk, nails biting into flesh to steady myself. "He altered the entries manually." Logan crouched by my chair, eyes scanning the log timestamps. His breath caught, shoulders coiling. "Why would he do that?" he asked, voice thick. My mind flickered to every interaction with Derek, his forced smiles, his too eager nods, the way he lingered whenever I passed. I dismissed it as awkwardness. Now it felt predatory. In the next heartbeat, we moved together to Derek's cubicle. The fluorescent glare on his monitors was harsh enough to burn. I stood before him, fingers tight around the chipped mug I'd brought for balance, the ceramic's jagged edge pressing cold into my palm. Derek looked up, eyes widening behind round glasses, face paling. Sweat beaded at his hairline. "Derek," Logan said evenly, voice low. "We need to talk." My ribs tightened so much it hurt to breathe. Derek's hands hovered over his keyboard, knuckles white. His mouth opened, closed, and words didn't come. He swallowed hard, neck veins throbbing. I stepped closer. "The duplicate entries," I said, voice faltering. "They came from your account at midnight." "Why?" My chest trembled, mind racing through possibilities, office politics, jealousy, fear. I felt sick, stomach twisting into knots. Betrayal had always tasted metallic, but this was fresh and bitter. Derek's gaze flicked between my eyes and the chipped mug in my hand. The hum of the AC felt deafening. His shoulders jerked. You wouldn't have made the projection look good without my changes," he stammered, voice quivering. I thought if I fixed the numbers, you'd notice me. You'd appreciate my work. You'd like me." His confession tumbled out in a rush, each word laced with desperation. My jaw clenched, heart pounding. Rage and pity warred inside me, one side burning hot, the other aching cold. I felt tears sting at the corners of my eyes, throat raw. You sabotage us for my attention? I whispered. My fingers squeezed the mug's handle until I thought it might crack. Derek's chin trembled. He looked defeated, small. I'm sorry, he choked. I thought, everyone sees you and Logan collaborating, and I feel invisible. I wanted you to see me. His voice broke, raw guilt tumbling into the sterile air. He pressed both hands to his temples, breathing shallow bursts. Logan shifted, jaw slack. His eyes flicked to me, question lingering there. What did I want to do? My chest thundered. I felt nauseated. The eerie calm that had guided me through my own revenge now felt empty, powerless. I realized the stakes were more than professional rivalry. They were human lives and trust shattered. I set the mug down on Derek's desk with a solid thud. The chipped edge scraped wood in a warning. We could expose you to HR, I said, voice low, trembling. You know what that means. My fingers itched to flee but remained anchored. Derek swallowed, shoulders slumping. I understand, he whispered. His gaze dropped to the floor. I saw the raw ache, wanting respect, belonging, desperate enough to destroy someone else's achievement for a moment's notice. My chest ached with sympathy I didn't expect. Logan cleared his throat. Derek, you'll attend a disciplinary meeting. Then you'll work with us directly, no more behind-the-scenes adjustments. If you want recognition, earn it honestly. His tone was firm, but I heard compassion under the steel. Derek nodded jerkily, eyes moist. As we left his cubicle, I felt the current shift again, from accusation back to a tentative solidarity. I glanced at Logan, chest heaving. He reached for my hand, squeezing gently. The chipped mug waited on Derek's desk, silent witness to another betrayal, and to a chance at redemption. In that quiet, charged moment, I realized that revenge's river had branched into accountability and compassion. The real test wasn't in punishment, but in whether trust could grow from the broken fragments. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of choices yet to come. I arrived at my desk before sunrise, the humming of monitors greeting me like an old friend. The chipped mug from Derek's cubicle rested beside my keyboard, its rough edge a testament to all we'd endured. I ran a fingertip along its rim and remembered how betrayal and restitution had carried us to this moment. The office was quiet, each breath and footstep magnified in the early light. I let the calm settle in my bones. Today felt like a beginning. Logan slipped in behind me, pausing to glance at the mug. He offered a small, grateful smile before settling at his own station. We exchanged a nod of solidarity, then dove into the day's agenda, finalizing the client's year-end report and drafting a proposal for the next quarter. Our collaboration had become seamless, a fragile harmony stitched together by hard lessons. Mid-morning, Sarah appeared with 2 cups of jasmine tea. She set one before me, the steam curling upward. You both have done something remarkable, she said softly. Turning chaos into cohesion. I smiled, warmth blooming in my chest. We did it together, I replied, glancing at Logan across the rows of monitors. His eyes met mine, steady and sure. By noon, we convened in the war room to rehearse our executive summary. Logan led with a confident calm, clearly outlining key findings and proposed strategies. I supplemented his points with narrative context, how our team's integrity safeguards data, ensuring the company's reputation. When we practiced the section on new quality control measures, our words came alive, rooted in the trust we'd rebuilt. After the dry run, Logan leaned in, voice low. Thank you for standing by me, he said, eyes earnest. I know forgiveness isn't guaranteed. My chest tightened as the memory of his betrayal shimmered beneath the surface, but I steadied myself on the chipped mug. I believe in second chances, I replied, meeting his gaze. But trust is something we earn every day. Relief and hope mingled on his face. The final presentation to the board was a success. Firm leadership praised our clarity and cohesion, and the proposal was approved pending minor adjustments. As applause filled the room, I felt pride tempered by humility, recognition that our journey had forged something stronger than the sum of our mistakes. That evening, as twilight draped over the city, Logan and I walked out together. We paused by the building's fountain, its waters dancing in the fading light. He reached into his pocket and drew out a small photograph, me and him on our first day at the firm, fists bumped over mismatched coffee mugs. I traced the image's worn edges, the corners curled. "I found this cleaning my desk," he said softly. Before any of the chaos, when we were just two hopeful newbies. He extended it, vulnerability shining through. "I wanted you to have it, so you'd remember why we started." My throat tightened. I folded the photo gently and tucked it into my pocket. "Thank you," I whispered. I looked up at him, truly seeing the man who'd hurt me but also fought to make things right. He offered me his arm, and I slipped mine through his. The chipped mug rested heavy in my bag, a relic of broken trust and reclaimed power. The photograph bloomed in my pocket, a promise of shared purpose and cautious hope. Together, we stepped into the night, ready to navigate whatever twists the future held. And in that moment, I understood that our river of betrayal had widened into a path of renewal, one we would walk side by side, ever mindful of the currents that shaped us.